כאישה בציריה, וכיבדו לך הגור השק, על בעל נעוריה. Do you know that melody?
I haven't heard it.
La 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 la, la 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 li la la, la 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 la, la la la. No, I went on the high holiday boat just a moment. The ya da da di da di da dum, di di da dum, da da da. Da 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 da, da 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 dee da da. Go again. Dee ya na 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 na. Dee na 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 na. Dee ya na 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 da 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 da. Da, da, da. That's that chant that's done at the end of it. To Zion and to her cities, like a woman in her youth who is now a virgin wearing a sackcloth, a mourning, grieving for the man of her youth, for her husband. And then it goes for all the other places. And of course there is now, when I first came to Israel, there was, before they had Yad Vashem Institute, excuse me, on the mountain they had a thing called Marte Fashoah, the cave of the Shoah, in which they had some of those things that they could show from concentration camp and so on. And there was also a poem like this, for Poland and for its cities, and would go on, describe the various cities in Poland, for Warsaw and for Vilna and so on and so forth, and then they would have that. And some of these things have come into the current editions of Eicha.
I've heard
And
Kaddish is done that way too.
pardon?
I've heard a Kaddish.
That's the
done
Kaddish that was in the Sim Shalom prayer book for Yisker, where it says Vilna, Treblinka. They use all those names there. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Rabbi Bronstein borrowed it for Tisha B'Av.
Yeah, it's the Kaddish from Sim Shalom. Yeah. And that was based on Elie Wiesel, taken from one of his novels, where he has a character pray for those souls who have gone.
Patel did something similar about Hiroshima that way too.
Pardon?
Patel did something similar with
About Hiroshima?
In Book of Lights.
Uh-huh.
At the end, he did this Kaddish for his friend who had died, and he was bringing in all these images his friend was carrying and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a very nice bringing in of a very similar
Well,
idea.
it's necessary.
Yes.
It's so necessary. Just talked with my daughter in Israel. And hi, good Erev Shabbos. And she was telling me about the tension that's building there. It's so great. People are saying the government is crazy. Why are they doing that? We are not getting anything in return. It's going to get worse. They'll see it as a victory for their oppression. We mustn't let this happen. Why should families be uprooted? You hear all that stuff. It's very hard to hear it and not somehow feel that they're right. And on the other hand, the thing isn't going to move without it. So here is where
Ben-Gurion said years ago, if we keep the West Bank and Gaza, it will be like inviting a cancer into us.
Mm-hmm. Look, people got at that point It's two things. One, you get intoxicated. The fact that Yerushalayim is in our hands. I remember the Tisha B'Av right after that. I was in Montreal. We had just finished a seminar there. It was really a colloquium of rabbis who had come together. And we were in the shul of Rabbi Hartman, who was at that time in Montreal. He had a shul in Montreal. And so what he did was, we were in his shul, and he was saying, there we go. And he was saying to the people, we are going to daven Maariv, we'll read Eicha, and then I'm going to go home and eat dinner and honor that Yerushalayim is in our hands. That's an Orthodox shul. You can imagine that, you know. And he threw him into consciousness, and we were all excited. Yerushalayim is now in our hands, you know. Then, of course, there was the other intoxication with the extra land and the sense of, if they would have won, they would have taken it from us, you know. Why should we have to give back the Sinai? You know, we didn't attack them, they attacked us. So if you gain land and defending yourself and fighting the battle, in all history it belonged to the conqueror.
Yes.
Right? Anyway, so there was this very strong feeling that we had about it. I don't know if I read this to you. I have a piece.
Well, I've had a question on this, though.
Pardon?
For some time. I've had a question. Has any provision been made for there being Palestinian Jews, just as there are Israeli Arabs?
That's been my argument
Rather than this
for years.
big
Why is
division.
it that all the Arab countries have to be Judenrein, and they call us the racists? You know, we were there before Muhammad was born. We were in Babylon, in Iraq, and we were in Syria. And we had communities in Aram Naharaim and Aram Tzova, how we called it, and the whole Talmud was done.
And in Saudi Arabia, the
Yeah.
3 tribes that Muhammad killed were
Right.
right there next to him.
Right. So anyway, I want to read you something that I had written at one point. I thought it was both funny and insightful, so here it goes. Okay. A meditation on the state of Jewish mythic world after the hard drive crashed. Okay. My hard drive and motherboard crashed. If you have experienced this breakdown in the extension of your memory, the holder of your information, you will feel with me how the invisible means of support of the cyber world is now not accessible to you. Now you think through how this feels, right? We are spread into our machines. It gives one moment of computer relation. It gives one a moment of computer-related depression and grieving for the now forever lost files that you failed to back up. And as you remember what you have lost, you want to do what you can to restore everything to the status quo ante quem, so that your life may continue uninterrupted. And some of us try to do just that. But imagine, you had an old DOS or System 6 Mac. And now, as you consider the restoration, you can already get a Pentium motherboard, a faster net surfing modem, and the latest of Windows. And I wrote Mac OS 8, that was years ago, right? In fact, you're building a newer and broader and even better platform for your information base. You have a concern that the new system may be able to handle the old software applications which you need to reestablish so that the backups will work back in, right? So you have to have a system that will be downward compatible, right? In other words, your system will have to be downward compatible while being the best you can get together at this time. Thinking about time. In the time dimension of the workaholic in me, I ought to be devastated. The frustration blocks anything else but frantic casting about on getting it all fixed. But now Shabbos comes, and for the next 48 hours I can't do very much, and I must shift. So I awaken to the dimension of time beyond the market workplace. I can see the gestalt of my weekday calamity in a larger field. Enlarging into the world of the Mashala Kadmoni, the primal myth, I begin musing on Jewish history, on the mythic dimensions that hold our world together, allowing the sparks of Kabbalistic light to illumine the field. And here's what arose for me. Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. God creates worlds and destroys them. The cosmic catastrophe, the vessels are shattered. There's only chaos, tohu, where there was before a semblance of tikkun, of order. Mashal Nimshal. Mashal Nimshal is the way in which we talk about a parable, a story told that contains a spark of insight and will evoke an image, a pattern, a gestalt that becomes independent. It can be lifted off its original setting, the mashal, and still the dynamics inherent in the analog's original setting, they can be transferred to the yet incoherent mass of data. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
The mind operation is that I tell a story, and then I'm saying pick that gestalt off that story, leave the story and the data behind, and now apply the story to these data, and all of a sudden something comes, and I say, aha, and that's the whole point of having a mashal, okay? And when that template is placed on the toe, the chaos, a pattern emerges that makes for the original spark of the insight to be applied, to give meaning to what before was only bewildering. Okay? I had just a lot of data, I didn't know what to do with them. So permit a pun. The digital world of the computer has become for me a great analog. Okay. My first computer, with the awesome memory of 36K and a cassette tape drive to save me the data at at 300 baud, was a revelation for me. I'm reading that thing. I take it there was a Chaver meeting. That's where you come from. Okay. I'm reading here a Tisha B'Av meditation, and I don't know if I've ever read this one for you, but it starts out with the breaking down of my hard drive.
Oh, you keep mentioning that.
Do you remember me reading that?
Yes, that's from years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you did a Kabbalistic,
Right. So here we come to the
memory.
Nimshal, okay? I was saying that the Mashal...
It was 96 or 97 you wrote it.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
So then I finished here saying that you have an opportunity to repair the old one, but why should you not have a better motherboard, a larger drive, so you build a new machine. But the problem of the new machine is that it must be downward compatible, or else you won't be able to read the files that you did before, okay? So you can see the Nimshal emerging that has to do with our history, okay?
That's the renewal perspective.
Okay, so here we go. My first computer, with the awesome memory of 36K and a cassette drive to save the data at 300 baud, was a revelation for me. Software had the power to take the written Torah and make it flexible in software as if it were oral Torah. What do I mean by that? I write something, and then I go and fix it, correct it, and so on and so forth. It is always in flux when it's digitized, okay? The mind of the computer freed me from the fundamentalism of the script once written and Gutenberg's imprimatur. Each time I corrected a copy on the primitive word processor, it looked cleaner and better than before. Not so my editing on paper that made for every bettering a messier page. Okay. Only as I reflect on this now, it seems to me that this has something to do with the process of tikkun olam and renewal. Then came my experience with Apple Plus. Now I could put in more memory and cards that could do all sorts of things I never could do before. I could use now peripherals that were out of bounds to me before, but taking the files from my old 36K Exodus sorcerer, that was his name, was not easy. emulation was cumbersome since the file formats were not compatible. But I did succeed, and then came the new system MS-DOS. Who could resist the lure of MS-DOS? Like H-DOS, Lomo, yeah? Truth in the religious law that and so on. Okay. It was hard to learn the lingo that wasn't intuitive and accessible, but once learned, it proved much more flexible than x86 CPM and Apple's ProDOS. The new manipulations of text and data, as well as the communication, were now possible. It was the Talmudic era of my computer life, the time when the rabbinic hegemony, and there were things I could never do myself. I needed a mumche, an expert, a maven, in short, a computer rabbi to help me steer through the shoals of error messages. The halacha of the software incompatibilities that froze my computer had to have its dairy and meat separated. I needed a virus detector to keep my house kosher. And every year, at least twice before Rosh Hashanah, before Pesach, I needed to delete old obsolete files and clean up my drives. Finally, the recent and modern period, I had a 368 machine with Windows 3.1. Taking the files from the past and installing them in a new environment became increasingly easier. I got a 468, a PowerBook, and now a Power Mac with System 7.5, which crashed. I could do so much with that machine, and I face a churban, a destruction, and a rebuilding. And yes, I will have the new system installed and more memory added. Now the work of sifting through the backups to see which of the old files are needed on the new drive and which had to be kept as backup archives but are no longer relevant. That's what comes next. I see the CPM as an analog of pre-patriarchal Judaism. The Chaldean, Egyptian, Canaanite religion. With Abraham and Moses, we got to Apple Plus and ProDOS. Many programs that worked before were incompatible with ours, like the deeds of the land of Egypt, which you have left, in the land of Canaan, which you're about to enter. Maseh Eretz Mitzrayim, you couldn't use anymore. It was not compatible. And Maseh Eretz Canaan wasn't compatible. Between the destruction of the first temple and that of the second, it was as if the old Sadducean ProDOS and Pharisaic MS-DOS were waging a Kulturkampf for controlling the shared and common standard. Christianity and Islam, Amiga and Atari, two systems that tried to gain ground in Judaism and didn't make it for us. In the rabbinic period, we stayed with MS-DOS and our PC clones and added Gaonic enhancement. Database managers like the Shulchan Aruch, theological spreadsheets, Guide of the Perplexed, Midrashic word processors, capable of making a variety of Pardis formats. And Apple introduced Lisa and the Macintosh with its graphic interface. Now, between what you see and what you get, there's no longer a chasm. Things were made user-friendly. This is how the Baal Shem Tov and Hasidism, even the Misnagdim who opposed Hasidism, claimed that their new way was an awful deviation of the common MS-DOS standard to have the windows that would open on their platforms to graphic interface. Kavanah and window goes with that. Windows 31 could be patched onto MS-DOS and still was kosher, but how Orthodoxy managed to claim that it made only update the Chiddush and not to change a Shinui, Because that's the point that Rav Soloveitchik once made. We can do Chidushim, we can't do Shinuyim. Okay? And look what riches it has produced. ArtScroll has given us access in English to immense treasures of the past. I see in the Holocaust the crashing of our hard drive. Since that time, we have all been frantically rebuilding the old files, some insisting that we restore our system to the standard of the pre-Holocaust motherboard. Others are willing to update as long as they maintain at least a semblance of still using MS-DOS. Jewish Renewal has opted for the RISC processor. Do you remember that?
Yep.
That was a particular kind of chip that they had,
What
which stands for reduced instructions, something like that.
It was more efficient, worked fast.
Yeah, because it's simplified.
So a more intuitive and user-friendly interface, one that is graphic and allows for the right brain lateral and fuzzy thinking. A system which gives you fewer error messages. And now I face the rebuilt and enhanced computer and have to load back the files I want on it. After the breaking of the vessels, I have to sift through the rubble of the backup disks for the applications I want to reinstall, which I will have and which I will forego. I need to decide which of the old text files will be of use to me. I need to make a biru hanitzutzot, a sorting of sparks and releasing them from the klipot, their shells. I have to keep my virus alert on to keep from contaminating the new drive. And how will I get all the lost addresses back and the email contacts? I have to start some things from scratch. Somewhere in the future still awaits a global standards, Unix. On that day, the peaceable kingdom will have arrived, on all sharing one standard for global communication and compatibility.
Right. So you have the Linux people who share that dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need a copy for Tom.
Huh?
Yeah.
I need a copy for Tom.
Okay, I'll be glad to give it to you. All right, take this one. I have more.
No,
You will understand
that
this
was
very
10
well.
years ago that
Yes.
you wrote that.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I don't remember.
But you know, it's so chronicling. It's the mashal. Just once it hit me, how the updating and everything all that we have to work through. What kind of a model this is in our real world. Anyway, last week we were going crazy looking at the issue of Hiyyuv.
Who was the author or source of the Sidur that we were looking at? The Sidur that we were looking
It was
at.
from the...
Last week.
Yeah.
From,
It was
It's
a
Rebbe Leroth's people. You've seen this sitter. Oh, oh, that's such balecken. It's wonderful.
Oh, wow. It's beautiful.
let's see if I have that written down. Can you
No,
say it?
Reb Arla. It's Reb Arla Roth.
Oh.
Not the bub.
Just
I'm
came out.
sorry, it's not the bub.
Just came out.
Oh, I
Huh?
Just came out. Just came out.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's his name has him? Beagleisen. But you look at it's so
I know,
wonderful.
nice
It's-
full font.
Yes.
This here is a diary by Rav Kook, and there's some beautiful pieces on here. Maybe I'll read you some. I translated some of them, but let me read you some of the Hebrew. The thing is called Chadarav, Heviani HaMelech Chadarav.
Is this put out by Mossad Rav Kook or it's...
It is, I don't know, put it out, let me see.
They're really proceeding
No,
rather
it's,
slowly.
It's from the Kazer of Cook.
Reut. Hotza'ah or Reut. Stands for friendship and so on. Okay. I'll read you just a little bit. It's so amazing. Mitochi, מתוך מעייניי, הנני צריך תמיד לקחת את האוצרות הגנוזים. תמיד אני קשור באותו הצער הקדוש של דרישת השלימות העליונה. וזו אינה מתמלאת, ואינה צריכה להתמלות, כי זאת היא תכונת ההריגה הנצחית, שיסודה הוא הצמאון האלוהי, אשר כל דבר אחר שבעולם לא ירווה אותו, כי אם המבוקש לבדו. הצמאון לבדו שיחשף תמיד יותר ויותר, ויוכר תמיד יותר ויותר, הוא בעצמו הוא מתהפך למקור כל עונג, למכון כל האדנים הרוחניים, לזיו שדי. You know, I read it and I'm starting to fly with that.
Float.
So I started to translate some of these into English. I'll read you those. So I start to check out the issue of Hiyyuv. Can anyone summarize again what we were talking about? Help out a little bit.
We're
Well,
talking
we were
about,
talking about Keva Kavana to be very, very simple.
Well,
But
but the beginning it was so strong when we heard the story about a man who had attended a Jewish renewal mincha, which was with drums and with all kinds of other things, and he was very pleased with that. But then he says, "But I wasn't Yotze."
that's it. That was the topic.
Okay, that's how we began to go into the thing. What is it that holds us to be Yotze?
Yeah.
Then we talked about Manny Rockman's definition, Yotze Yidei Chovato, as being he extricated himself from the grasp of obligation. You hear that's such a good description, you know. You can't grab him anymore and say you are still obligated. Okay. So then we started to go into the issue of Hiyyuv and how's the Hiyyuv seen? Is the Hiyyuv seen as something that was given at Sinai, and because we are creatures is obligating us, and we are Jews taken out of Mitzrayim, we are obligated by it, and there's no other way to deal with this but to say, this is our obligation. You can't free yourself from this obligation.
And also, I mean, the discussion also ranged on the source of the Hiyyuv, whether it's internal or external.
Right. That's where we got to say, okay, are we in the same place about issues of Hiyyuv? Where does it come? Toward the end, we got to the place that Hiyyuv is something we take on in devotion, and we talked also about the issue of Neder, because Neder is a Hiyyuv that's not imposed on us by anyone else. And at the same time, we have to keep it almost like an absolute. So, naselo chaticha de yisura, you know, and so shavi al nafshe chaticha de yisura. So it's just like you can't break that neder. So that's how we left it, and there was a feeling that the conversation wasn't over, that this deserves a little bit more time. So I'd like to make that conversation possible. And who would like to begin?
It raises in me a question that I've always had, and I've always had an answer for. Am I following Yiddishkeit? Am I following Torah? Or is my allegiance to God? And for me, I take Torah very literally. I'm a servant of God. And I have to know God's will. And the written word is insufficient. I have to penetrate beyond that to knowledge of God. You know, if you're a servant, you don't know the master. Who are you serving? Your own ideas or what? So I see the work as perfecting the knowledge and the relationship. And that dictates.
Let me read you something that I once wrote about that has some bearing to what you just said. Let me just unhook from here. Pause.
Perfecting the knowing.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not just you, and it's not just something from outside, but it comes from a place that is the not you.
Well,
how do you define you?
Yeah. I know. That's
so,
the
so,
discernment.
so part of the knowing for me was the realization that I am this node of consciousness within it. And so it's not external and internal, it's a process of being.
Yeah. I mean, the experience I have with people who use the term yoke, say, in regard to a chiyuv about davening, say, tend to make the statement post facto rather than pre facto. Going in, so for me, going into, or prior to going into the experience, if I can determine what will be the fulfillment of that relationship is much better than doing it post facto.
May I?
Go.
I davened quite a bit. I lived in Brooklyn, and
Goes together.
so here I was.
Go together.
Here I was in the front community, and we'd daven mincha, and it was a terrible experience over and over and over again because people were basically doing it so that they could fulfill the obligation, and they weren't there with it.
Many of the people describe the people who daven what they call mitzvat anashim melumada, who daven so by rote as if they want to be. They have a bag on their shoulders and they can't wait to throw it off.
Exactly.
Right? And that's the experience. Let me read you something here. There are two attitudes regarding the function of religion in the spiritual journey of the soul. The first sees all religious discipline, as a vehicle to bring man to the great realization, as the Buddha would have it. A raft can be discarded after crossing the river. Or as Ramakrishna has said, the man travels to see the king in a carriage with his retinue, but once he comes to the king, he leaves everything outside and enters alone to meet the king. Okay, you got that? Mm-hmm. It's the attitude that says you go to your realization, then you can throw away all the tools that got you there. Okay. The second attitude is illustrated by a story of the Maggid. A man wears all sorts of travel clothes on his way to the capital in the palace of the king. Once he arrives, he takes out his best raiment and dresses himself to see the king in his finest. Though these 2 points of view are on one level diametrically opposed, yet both of them are the opinion that all religion is but a preparation for the moment of the truth in which the soul encounters God. The Far Eastern mode would have man discard discipline after discipline the closer one gets to God. It sees a continuation of the discipline a barrier, and after the encounter it's only so much excess baggage that best be discarded, okay? The Maggid's parable brings out the view that he who is farther away from the encounter can afford to have less discipline, but the closer one approaches the king, the more court manners one must display. Sevivav nisara me'od, that God is careful there, kechut hasara, yeah? Those in his immediate environment must be meticulous as a hair's breadth. The Midrash tells how people who are still far away do not have their actions scrutinized, but the closer one gets to God, the more meticulous one needs to be in observance and holiness. The redemptive process of the spiritual path works to redeem the soul from external and extraneous disciplines. The closer one comes, the less is needed on the outside. When one is raised to the rung of a tzaddik, there's only one precept left. Tzaddik b'emunato yichya. Tzaddik lives by his faith. And yet, tzaddikim who have been asked to describe how they shape their life in holiness, describe their inner faith practice in terms of the most detailed minutiae. This is not due to an obsession with details, but rather to a possession by God's presence in which everything is infinitely significant. In any case, the experience of liberation, insight, and realization is seen as a result of the person's intense preparation for that moment, which can, in some systems, be seen as reward for intentional holiness, or in other systems, a function of God's pure and undeserved grace, for which the saint has prepared fine and exquisite vessels to contain so great a gift. 2 ways to look at that. There still is another function, perhaps more important, in the prescriptions of the religion, giving us back to the high moment of realization. Consider the saint, the sage, the realized one, who meets the moment when he both dies and is reconstituted by God's creative will and grace, to be the person he was, in the same body, with the same basic qualities. He knows at this moment that as it was in the beginning, so it is now forevermore, and yet he will have to serve the Lord even from the point to which he has descended. So holy was the experience, yet so fleeting, that the moment he says yes to God, yes, I will work for the establishment of your kingdom, yes, I will do and obey, at this very moment an amnesia begins to set in. Part of the vision is lost, and the saint knows that he will have to find all sorts of ways to remember himself, to attach himself back. So he seeks out methods by which he can recall the holy moment, when he was in true touch with the sweet and holy grace, the brilliant and searing truth, the panoramic infinite view of the Holy Land. As he returns to the community with whom he shares his life, these reminders become part and parcel of the community's way of life, acting as windows to the infinite light. So you have a sense of, when we do something Zecha L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, so who says we are davening mincha to get there today? Maybe we're trying to remember that great mincha that we once davened at some other place, and we hope to connect with it again. You see, so look at Hiyyuv from this point of view. That says, I have some values. I value holiness. I had an experience, a commitment that comes very deep in my neshama when I said yes to that. And out of this comes my Hiyyuv. Okay, go.
There's another piece, to make contact within the davening and to be a channel for everybody else at that point. So.
And I was thinking about the channel piece, the earlier examples you gave of the raft for crossing and so forth, the clothes to travel in. You need to not throw those things away necessarily. You need to keep them handy for helping the other people make that same journey. If you expect other people to make the journey based on how you think you can be now after you've arrived, it doesn't help. You've just you've destroyed the path.
So you're saying, here's the difference. The Buddha can throw the raft away, but the Bodhisattva can't afford to.
That's right.
Okay. All right. What strachst du?
Well, I heard something interesting a while ago that seems to relate, even though I'm here in the middle of the process here. Okay, so Midoraita from the Torah, there's an example for Birkat HaMazon. The only chiyuv of a bracha is Birkat HaMazon. So then along come the rabbis and add a whole slew of other brachot before and after. So what's going on here? What's the rationale behind it? So I forgot who said it, but it really made a lot of sense to me. It's so Birkat HaMazon is a model. Is a model of relationship. So somebody provides food and life and sustenance for you, so you say thank you. But that's not meant to be the only way of that particular relationship. It's an example that if you're a conscious, responsive and responsible being, then whatever interaction there is, there should be something to designate, to acknowledge and honor that particular relationship. So really what the rabbis were doing in that context is expanding the Hiyyuv, not because of the Hiyyuv in itself, but the Hiyyuv points to, again, the responsiveness and the responsibility of enhancing that relationship.
So here is where if I were to say the Chassid and the Misnagid would have an argument. What you're describing is a challenge to behavior. And now I decide the way in which I want to respond to the challenge, I want to do it my way. And the fact that there was matbeya shetavu chachomim, there was a mint, and if you use a slug, you're not yoitze, you didn't fulfill it. You have to say it in the language that the chacham have get. So we get to the place of Why did they choose that language? So a number of reasons come up. First of all, Baruch Ato Hashem Lamdeni Chukecha is already found there. Then in Baruch Nafshi it says Lahotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. So you have that part and you have that part. That's a good beginning of how to think of such a formula, how you put the formula of a bracha together. So they come up with this. The question is, they did this in a language that was their language. You know, I looked up the word Hiyyuv. There's nothing in Tanakh that uses that. It all begins with in Rabbinic Hebrew, where you have Hiyyuv mitchayev benafsho. Let me read you a few of these things here. The word says Hidlik Hagadish b'Shabbos Chayev mitchayev benafsho. Mitchayev benafsho. You have all these things. Then you have Chayev Nisa, you know, this kind of language that goes with Hiyyuv. So it has to do with a debt that we owe. That's basically what comes up here. Look how in the Our Father, and we forgive forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Now, if you figure for a moment what the word chayev means at that time, and it's mostly in Aramaic, because if you look in the Chumash, you won't find chayev. But if you look in the Targum, you're going to find chayev. Okay, so it begins with almost with an Aramaic loan word that's brought in. It's not the same kind of thing that in Chumash and Tanakh we have mitzvah. The word mitzvah, it feels like mitzvah. A stronger approach. Go.
There's a big difference between debt and mitzvah. In debt, you're paying. In mitzvah, you are gaining.
Well, take a look with that sentiment. Ma ashiv ladonai kol tag milohi olai. What can I give back? Such wonderful stuff, and I feel, therefore, kos Yeshua Esa v'Shem Yakra. You know, and there are the devotion. That's where we left last time. That we started to look at what makes a person take on devotional acts. Okay, and we anchored that to Hiyyuv, so it doesn't come so much as a.
So another English word would be obligated, an obligation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not so much a debt. But I mean, in the Gemara, you find it as a debt, but you also find it as an obligation.
Sure.
So you take on obligation in relationship to the level of responsibility. So when you, like in Baba Metzia, the whole thing about a shomer chinam and a shomer shoel and all that,
Yeah.
the degree of chiyuv is based upon the assumption of responsibility and the amount that you're supposed to give in shmirah to a pikadon. Right? So in the same sense of, I mean, we haven't even looked at, are there levels of chiyuv that you can, it's like, part of the discussion last week had started out, I think, or someplace there was about that mincha has a chiyuv, mariv doesn't have a chiyuv. So if you're going to daven mariv, how do you approach it as far as the nature of responsibility? De Rabbanan, you don't have a full chiyuv. But if you look at the stuff that you've written about tshuva at night and everything, isn't there a small element of chiyuv to daven into the tshuva process?
There's no question in my mind. I want to, you see, as long as we get to the notion that pull, I'm not going to give it a name yet, okay? That pull or that impelling thing, either it pulls me or it pushes me in direction. And I want to say, I know that, and I want to honor that, because something of this has to do with value to me. a world in which value rules, this feeling that I want to respond to, satisfy, yeah, that's for real. So then we start asking, what name are we going to give that? So one of them is the pshat of mitzvah, you know. One description can be, that is such a strong feeling that if you think you can avoid it, you can't. It is kof aleim har kegigis, you know, this is so strong, so powerful. On the other hand, you have the thing saying of Nasa v'nishma, if it comes from you, Rabbeinu Shalom, you know, it comes from this value place. I feel this tug, it's a special tug. It's not the same tug that I feel when I get angry or when I get reactive. I value this, okay? So in a way I want to enshrine it. So I want to find more possibilities for it. So how I'm going to decide which way I'm going to turn the ritzuas on my film and so on and so forth, all this. The other day I had an interview with somebody about the book. And they asked me about chukim, because I had written in the book about how chukim are more transformative than any of the other mitzvahs. And it's, you know, it's like it has, if I were to say the shamanic stuff is in chukim, it's not in mishpatim, it's not in edus so much as it is in chukim and so forth. So once I heard from the Rebbe, Rebbe Nachum Mendel, a remarkable statement, and it's true and it's simple, that even mishpatim and edus, the hidurei mitzvah that we do there are chukim.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Got that?
No, say it again.
So imagine if I decide that I'm going to have shmure matzah. Okay? Now, the mitzvah itself is Labant Kiskos Yom Tzeis Chomeres Mitzrayim, and I can fulfill it with Manischewitz matzahs too, because even in the factory they have to say L'Shem matzahs mitzvah, so they should get the hechsher, so I can fulfill it with that, okay? Why do I decide I want to go and have shmure? And I'm not going to eat gebrochts, and I'm adding all these kinds of things, which, if you say the ikar mitzvah as it was described, that you should remember that you went out of Mitzrayim and that you were avodim hayinu. So what's this got to do with that? And you see that what we add to that, take a look how we make a lulav, how we bind the lulav. Mitzat adin, on the basic situation, you don't have to have all these kinds of things that you do. Dafke, the Sfardim are going to take some golden threads and tie it around the lulav, kaput, tamarim, to make it this way. The Edot HaMizrach. So you have so many people who do these kinds of extra little things for something, and these partake of chukim. If you try and make some sense out of that, the arguments aren't going to go. They take on those things take on an absolute around it. Okay.
Because of nadar, in a sense.
Huh?
Because of that nadar quality, in a sense.
That's right.
That something, you know, in the devotional, in becoming that close to the king, that you want
Yeah.
to even watch your shoelaces, and
Right. So watch that thing how it says here, you know, Ma'ashiv Lashem Kol Tag Miloyel, and then Nedarai Ladonai Yashalim Negdana Lechol Amo, you know?
yeah.
But this comes in as a personal thing and not as a prescribed thing.
Well, that's the point.
And
So
that's my struggle with the whole thing.
Yeah,
It's
so-
my whole life story is a Hiyyuv, and you would
All
say.
right. So here's the Inyan, you know. I once had this geschäft. Why does the Rebbeinu Shalom want me to do the mitzvah like somebody else? You know,
Okay.
I would like to play around and see what kind of connections I want to make with those ritzuas and turn them this way, turn them that way. You know, all kinds of nice things that I can do with it. Let me go and get a tattoo for that. You know, it's not gonna
Madonna
wash off,
style.
huh?
Madonna style.
Yeah. So you get the idea that you, but then So I had a tiny Rebbeinu Shalom, why do you give me the same mitzvahs you give to other people? You didn't create me like other people, so I got to be able to get the mitzvahs that are for me. So the answer I got, the way in which you will do the mitzvah, nobody else will be doing it. Okay, so it comes back to the kavanah, to the form, to the attention I give to the mitzvah. That's special.
But then you got to deal with the.
It's not fresh.
But there's always this tendency to want to anchor your chidushim
Yeah.
in the past. So you take, for example, eco-kashrut.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so you can anchor it in Tsar Balei Chayim and Bal Tashchit.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you've written and Arthur has written. It's really the contemporary impulse.
Yeah.
And it's lo chashuv if it's grounded or not. That's the action operatives of our time. And not, you're stretching hafachba,
Of course.
all right? So...
You see, there is that's where we come back to the business of, for whom are we doing that?
Mhm.
If we get to the place of tzorech gavoa, that something is needed, that we make a contribution to how God can be in the world, how God can rule this world. It depends on us, right? And what we contribute to this should have more, if you will, cognitive mass, more power built in, and by bringing it down, that same thing that's coming down right now, and I tie it to something to the past, I get the energy that my Zayda and all these people have put into Tzar Balachayim and into Baltashchit, and how they cared, and this energy gets to reside with me in doing it, and it becomes more global. So if I go from the democratic point of view that my person and the satisfaction of the life of my person is what's important, no, then I understand, then I should always come back to that. But if I say I am integral to this universe and I have to make a contribution, and the more I can make my fibers connect in this quantum way to everything else, the better my contribution will be here, the stronger it'll be, yes.
We're already connected. We have to bring it into knowledge. And that actualizes the system.
I call it refinement.
Yeah.
I think Hiyyuv is not a good word.
Well, it's rabbinic Hebrew that we can't
it's
get
heavy
rid of it.
duty. It has bad connotation.
Yeah, go
I
on.
don't know what we can do in Hebrew here.
I'll show you.
Okay, but I think it's refinement. It's really, and what you described right now, so beautiful, it was a very good answer for me. It's really a refinement of that pure connection, that you have arrived to that moment of aha and knowledge, but you cannot just remain there and drop the boat. You can't, because you have to come back to yourself and to your everyday life and to the tomorrow and the tomorrow after.
Right, and integrate so
And
that
integrate,
so that the purpose of life in us can be fulfilled in us, yes.
So it's every day, it's every moment you really make a choice. So it's every moment a refinement. It's a process of refinement. And it includes also the past and all the halacha and everything. But it still has to go through the refinement. You can't just accept everything that was written 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and 1,000 years ago, whatever. You can't, because it was their refinement, not my refinement.
Not everything works that way, though. Go back to Rav Soloveitchik. You're limited to chidushim, not shinuim. But let's just take in the area of those halachas that pertain to women. All right, we're not going to refine them. We're not going to come up with chidushim. We're going to come up with shinuim. All right. I have wrestled with this for a long time about whether one can just adjust it. It doesn't work. It's a kind of a rationalization and apologetics that doesn't sit well. Sometimes there needs to be Refinement is really nice, particularly with the way you look at yourself or other people, all right? And you're working on refining somebody, it means they're almost there, or I'm almost there, I'm not that bad, all right? Do I need to change completely? It depends on who I'm asking. If I'm asking myself, no, I need to be refined. If I ask Nadia, you better change, all right? And that's the external versus the internal, all right?
How about the refining of the knowing?
You're really onto this, yeah.
The
There is
refining
no
of the what?
external
The
and
knowing.
internal. There is
Of
only
the
one.
knowing.
Yeah, the attunement.
Well, I want to say something. We're all such nice people. We're all such kulam ahurim, kulam berurim, kulam kedoshim. And there are some mornings I don't feel like davening. Okay? And I'll be very glad to be yotze that morning and to drop the load from my shoulders, you know, and say, Rebbeinu Shalom, that's all I can do for you today. So don't push, okay?
Don't push.
And what's wrong with that?
So what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Do you feel guilty?
Huh?
Do you
What's
feel
wrong with it?
guilty?
No, I'm just pointing out that when we talk on this high level, that it always should be. This is the difference. Always I talk about the is and the ought. You know, my ought is in this consciousness. My ought is in the refinement. My ought is in the devotional thing. Oh, you know, that's why I like to do this thing, the Shema, with the word halavai. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha halavai, halavai, b'chol levav, b'chol nafsho v'medecha, halavai, halavai. You know, because that I can say with an emes too, you know, but I'm not there yet. So I just want us to have the whole point that remains soft in a social body, in a social organism. It needs to have all these tendrils out, you know. Chanoch lanar al pi darko. You just some of the things have to do with entrainment. You know, I feel while halachically we are dealing with the issue of is a Jew who is born of a Jewish mother, a Jew has a Jewish father, make it patrilineal, matrilineal, and I have a sense that it has a lot more to do how plugged in are you with our people, you know? So that genetically the papa is giving as much as the mama is giving in this situation. Yes?
For a while, I lived in Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn. And that's not a Jewish neighborhood. I had to go to Borough Park twice a week for a fix because I was culturally isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But could we go back in that statement? You said some mornings you get up
Yeah,
and you want to get rid of the burden.
yeah,
That was your language.
yeah.
From thence cometh the burden.
All right, watch this. This is really good. Okay? This is really good. This is the Kohlberg scale, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the day when I'm on number 6, you know, and Ma'ashiv Hashem, and I take my time and I light the incense and the candles, and I sit down and get my Yesod Foundation and all that kind of thing. That's great, right? But the day when I don't feel like davening, I'm over here, which means that I've made a regression. When I make a regression, I get to the place of toilet training. Do you understand? I'm going back to the place where it was really a Hiyyuv, where I wouldn't get breakfast if I didn't daven or something like this, and not it has nothing to do with whether my mama will not give me breakfast or I, but I know that part of me will not give me breakfast if I haven't done the davening. Right, and that comes from a regressed place. So that's so funny. If we see the dynamic of this, then we can say yes. There's a what do you want to
There's
say?
a couple. There's two things. From the, I think Tiferes Yosef on the Ishbitz Rebbe, he says that when it's the Haftarah of Tzav, Kilot Tziviti, I haven't commanded you on this day to bring carbonot.
Mm-hmm.
So he says on this day when you got the Torah. So then you were there, you were right connected. You didn't need to do that toilet training kind of thing. So that's one thing.
Right.
Then I was just playing again around with the root of Hiyyuv. So the Yud is not really part of the Shorish. So there's a theory that in Hebrew that really two root letters Right? So the chet and the vet. So
Right.
if you, what other letters that you add to it, you can get chiba, chaver, chevel.
Yeah, sure,
So it's all about being bound in a
Mhm.
relationship, and that's the obligation that comes along with no longer being in an independent context.
That's good.
See, that's another important point that we didn't bring up last week. I've always had this sense, I've never asked you, but back before Eish Kodesh started, and there were the occasional minyanim at the Hillel house. So you would ask me to come. And when we first arrived in Boulder, both Nadia and I told you that we're uncomfortable davening wherever there's a mechitza, right? But you sense, based upon my background, that if you ask me to come to make a minyan, I'll forgo my distaste of a mechitza for the minyan, right? I have never, no matter who the Shmendrik might be leading, I've been with some really terrible people in the past, I will never turn down the need for a minyan. Now that's a personal chiyuv. I've never felt that it was imposed externally. But it's my relationship, my personal relationship with community, irrespective of my own personal desires or needs. And we never brought up
It
that.
is part of the refinement. The community is not outside of God. Your relationship to the community is part of your relationship with God. There is no an external thing here.
You know what? There is an element that's called drosh v'kabel schar.
Yeah.
In other words, each one of us has our inner motivation for that. And you like it with refinement. And he's talking right now about going to a minyan where he doesn't want to go because they have a mechitza. But Klal Yisrael has a claim on him and he's going to go anyway.
Right.
Because in that moment he made a conscious decision
Yeah.
that that's his way now with God, to go and fulfill that
I
obligation.
want to tell you something. You forget this thing about going down on the scale. There's
I'm
sometimes
not
he
sure
may
there
want
is
to
such a
he
thing.
may want to sleep and he doesn't even want to think about Klal Yisrael, but not to go to a minyan is impossible.
and Dorit, with all, it's, I can see you refining yourself. I just can't see myself ever refining. That's,
You are refined.
Yeah,
Here's the stuff.
but I mean, those are wonder. I mean, there shouldn't be just one terminology or notion about this. Yeah, I mean, at times I think it's like when I before I encountered you, Reb Zalman, my problem with my work in Judaism was that I felt that Jews were hopelessly communal. All right? And I still think they
It's
are.
still true.
All right? But what I found is that renewal finally was the address that addressed individual concerns and tried to find a balance between the Hiyyuv of community, the call that community has upon us, and a little catering to individual spiritual needs. Then, after 3 years in the Aquarian Minyan, I began to ask you these questions about, aren't there requirements of the
Where are the standards, right?
where's the community
Yeah.
speaking? That's our historical experience, is the tension. It's what Shmueli in his 7 cultures talks about. From Me'atchila, we've been trying to find a balance between individual and collective needs. It's always been a tension. To me, the story of the daughters of Zlafchad is exactly that. What do these 2 women's claim? Or how?
Five.
I was thinking of bigamy for a second. What is their claim in relationship to a whole community standard? All right, that's where I think the origin of the tension is.
I want to tell you something. I was editing some of my ktavim that I have in Hebrew, and it's part of trying to get it all together so it shouldn't just be junk. And I came across a piece that where does Klal Yisrael begin in selling Joseph. Watch this. That you have Reuven doesn't like what the brothers do. Yehuda doesn't like that. Shimon and Levi are agitating all the time. Yisachar and Zevulun don't know which way to handle themselves. Dan, Naphtali, you go through a whole geschäft. And yet, when it comes to make that thing, nobody of us is going to tell Dad what happened. That's when the Shvatim created the possibility of being a people. Because if you go to Yaakov, Esau, Yitzchak, Ishmael, there could have been such a breakup of this whole thing. And if I ask, where was that impetus that bound it together? It was in the Mechilat Yosef.
Okay, you mean that they became very collective at the point where they had to keep it from Dad?
Yes,
That
and
was
and
the point where they all...
a covenant they made at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they even brought the Shechina in.
Huh?
They even brought the Shechina
Right. So when it struck me as to how the fabric of our people, where it got set, it was just.
It's
So,
based on guilt.
huh?
So it's based on guilt.
No, Freud has. If you go with Freud, we killed Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert, and the rest of the Torah is Moses and monotheism. You have the whole Maisa there, as he describes it.
So in the new consciousness, do we want to go back to that?
Yeah, I want to switch at this moment with something. Okay, there is a mikveh here in town, and I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Oh,
I've seen it.
We just argued it out at Chaver today.
it's operating.
Well, so I want to hear
Oh, yes,
about it
okay.
because I want to hear I want to have something to say about it. Go on.
Well, there's the recognition. Correct me when I get
Sure.
off base, but all right. There's the recognition of matov that sheyesh mikvah,
Yeah.
and it is a restrictive mikvah. It is utterly amazing that however many years, 80 years, whatever, that there have been Jews in Boulder believe mikvah, that we will eventually face the possibility of having two mikvahot here. We did ask, as Deb Dusansky is the mikvah lady now, and she is trying as much as possible to expand usage, access. It's still restrictive, and therefore, unless it met all the desires of the community, there will be a need for that second mikvah. We also requested that it not really be referenced as the Boulder mikvah, because the other mikvah in Yirtzeh Hashem will also be a mikvah. But I think it's and I've had a long discussion with the Rav about this issue, and he's very understanding of the needs. But I think I was very impressed, even though I spoke very strongly against the restrictiveness of this. I think Deb, and by extension Rachel, are really doing an awful lot to expand more than I'm used to when Chabad controls the mikvah. So am I fair in what I...
Yeah, that's pretty good. I made the point that there's a little kind of mini mikveh that gives people an actual taste and vision, up close and personal of mikveh consciousness in general. So it doesn't have to be in competition with something that has a more expansive vision, and at the same time, people who need to know that it's being used for the way that they feel comfortable, there is that mikveh. So
I think the fact that he has internal situations with Shiner for building the mikveh, and he felt that he was doing this thing, and it deserves, first of all, support. To say until the other mikveh comes, we are very glad that some people can use it at this point. I think we ought to say that. The other thing is, it's such a fantastic model. You have to go and see it.
that's what I'm saying.
It's very beautiful.
It has solar stuff there. The mikveh itself is not the antiseptic, doctor's office with fluorescent lights so that everything could be seen on your tush. But you go inside, and the gorgeous tile and what these people have put in to make this work, I think at least they deserve some people to come in and say, give them a yasher koach for having pioneered that. So the sense that we should bring, he didn't do it for turf either, because he got plenty of tzoros from the other guy. How dare he do that when he didn't give his stamp of approval for that? So there's internal stuff too, and he did a great job. I so enjoy seeing I have a shiur with him almost every Shabbos morning before we go to daven, and he doesn't let me use the mikveh either.
Right.
No?
Right. And Rabbi
How is it
Bronstein
restricted?
brought up the issue of,
For women.
while it is Deb Dusansky's view that it should be used for unmarried women,
Yeah.
the Rachel's, there seems to be a suffix about
Yeah.
what is the real kavanah there, but it seems that Rachel's view is that it should only be for married women. And while Deb is more than willing, so to speak, to sneak Deborah Bronstein in, Deborah Bronstein refuses to go and violate the precepts of that mikveh. So so the stretching of the stretching might be going a little
Wait.
faster than
Hold off for a moment. First of all, I think we're not dealing with a fact here. The fact is that while the monthlies, they will not let unmarried women go, but before Yom Kippur, any woman who wants to go to mikveh is okay.
Uh-huh.
I just want you
Yeah,
to
I
know
brought that up the first time
Okay,
when she
right.
came to the Chaver meeting.
Yeah.
So it's not. So if Deborah Bronstein wants to go, L'Shem, she isn't at this point in a relationship. She's going to do biad znut as a result of going to the mikveh. So the likelihood is that they would certainly stretch in her direction, saying that this is, if there is a committed couple, and the woman wants to go to mikveh and they're not married, I would, of course, be saying that the mitzvah that has to deal with Neder is much greater than the issue of being boiled someone not as a one-night stand with a certain kind of commitment. So, apnuya, that's not so bad in that situation. But they decided not to go with that, so that's fine. But I'm just saying, as far as doing a tefillah tshuva, I think they are not against that.
The other thing too, I brought up, because this is what Lubavitch Rebbe had mentioned, women after menopause,
Yeah,
who have never gone before,
yeah, should also go.
should also go.
Sure, to be potter of this geschäft, and the whole point of what we haven't begun to deal with is the issue of healing. Let's say if there's a person here who has received a treatment of a number of chemotherapies or what have you, and now the doctors are saying she's in remission and she wants to go and take and be tovel to be able to be, to be born again in that sense, because basically that's what the mikveh does at that point.
Right.
I think we could negotiate that, but if you take the notion and say because of this we can't talk, I think that's
Well,
a
Deb
different story.
gave the story today of a woman who's just finished chemo
Yeah.
that she brought to the mikveh. The thing that concerns me is that because the mikveh has been stretched beyond a lot of places in openness, to how much it will diminish the ability to go the extra distance, which isn't as great as it normally is, to raise the funds for what will probably be in a very expensive commons mikveh.
Well, I think that's that point. I would go the other direction. The more people will use this mikveh, the more money will be available. This doesn't operate with scarcity. If people
Right.
begin to understand what mikveh
Conscious
is
awareness,
about,
mikveh, right.
and they see a beautiful model of a mikveh, I have a feeling that they would say, can't we do this for our community and let it be adjacent to a
That's what
sweat
I'm
space and to a this and that?
Okay.
The likelihood is, I'd be voting for that, not go and knock on doors to raise money. But I think the recognition that this is here, that people should at least visit it and take a look at it and see how beautifully it's done. It's a great model. So anyway, I've
Yeah.
broken the lance for that.
Well, it's also, I mean, just at the Jewish festival was where I
Yeah.
had this long discussion with Rav Rosenkrantz, and he and I had spoken at a film that was shown.
Yep.
All right, and he told me in his jovial fashion, he said, "I want you to know, Reb Victor." All right, he calls me. All right, people warn me not to speak on the same platform with you. All right, he said, I didn't take it very seriously, and look what happened. We spoke for whatever it was, 20 minutes or so, and we weren't in disagreement on a single issue. All right, and it wasn't like it was non-controversial stuff. All right, and so and I told him about the experience in Berkeley with the Chabad rabbi, the chief one,
Yeah, Ferris.
Yehuda Ferris. I mean, he was one of the first people to greet Nadia and me when we arrived in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he knew that a lot of Aquarian Minyan people would daven there. And I said, yeah, but, you know, I issue you an open invitation to a daven with the Aquarian Minyan. And he laughs. He says, I can't come, you know.
And that's true. But Barry Barkin, when he moved in, did he tell you the story?
Yes. And so when Nadia and I used to go over to Barry's before Shabbos is over.
Yeah.
And then when it came time for the minyan, because Yehuda would walk
Right on the
by
corner,
Barry's
yeah.
house, he'd go, oh,
What?
sure, no, what was his first Hebrew name, Barry's?
Shoresh.
Shoresh.
Ben Zion Shoresh.
Ben Zion, and Barry would lean out the window, he said, I'm coming,
Uh-huh.
all right? And there was that wonderful relationship, all right? So it's you know.
He is a different, even Rosencrantz here, you take a look at this person, and I still don't know all of his life story, but he has come a long way, and he's got a whole series of accomplishments behind him, and he is doing this not because he's a shaliach, quote,
That's right,
because
just
a
l'shem shamayim.
shaliach isn't supposed to make a living. Right? And he is working computers and is doing a fine job. And if you have seen him on his motorcycle, it's a delight to see him. So good. I just want to say a good word for that mikveh because I wish I could go.
So do I.
All right, so we are looking forward. The other one, I think I told you that when I was in the Ukraine, I saw those bundles of leaves, you know.
Right.
And then they slather them up and they hold them up in the sweat and they come down on your back with that.
So let me conclude a mikvah story. When my mother died and she was in Israel, and I went to bury her, so I asked Nadia if there was anything she wanted for me to get from Israel, because I'd stay one day more than Shiva. She said, yeah, it's time that I get tefillin. So would you get me tefillin? But I only want them from Tzfat. Okay? So I bury my mother. I sit Shiva. I get up. I travel from Rishon LeZion to Tzfat. I go into the first store. I say, I want to buy some tefillin. The guy says to me, Ein tefillin b'Tzfat. I go, Ma pitom. And he repeats himself with no explanation. So I didn't know what, maybe because I looked a little non-orthodox. So I went to another store, got the same answer. All right? I go to Beit Chabad, which is huge there. The Rav was there. He said, I'm writing a pair of tefillin. Can you wait a few days and I'll finish them? I said, no, I have only one more day before I leave. So I really am beside myself. I decide I'm going to go daven at the Beit Knesset Arya Kodesh. On my way there, I see one more store and I walk in. It's one of those micro calligraphers. And he has one pair of tefillin left that he wrote. Sold it to me at cheap, $90, all right? I go home, I give Nadia the tefillin and everything, tell her the story of what it took to get them. And she tells me that we're going back for the unveiling, at the end of Shloshim. So we go back, so I figure it'd be nice to take and the kids to meet this guy. He takes me aside after he meets Nadia, and I told him I was buying the tefillin not for me, but for a woman. And he said, "Geg isn't the hate," He takes me aside, points down the hill, and he says, "You know what that is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's the mikveh of the Arya Kodesh." He says, "I want you to take your wife there and have her go in. And then when you get back to where you're staying and you fulfill the mitzvah of Pru Urvu, you will have a daughter." Because we brought 3 sons there. I said, "Isn't the mikveh for men only?" He says, "Yeah, but..." Right? So we go down there, and it's an unending line of Hasidim coming to the mikveh.
You have to wait really, don't understand.
And it is hot, all right? And the kids are going, "What are we here for?" And I don't know how to explain it to the kids. So finally I get an idea. We're never going to do it. It's never going to work. So I go into the mikveh, scoop up the water, run out and throw it on Nadia. Right? Did it 3 times for 3. All right? A year later, we go back to Israel, and I show the guy, Ricky. Sof Pasuk.
So you see, all the lies they told us really are true. Good Shabbos.